From boardroom meetings to bedtime stories, Coffee in the Barn explores the delicate dance of balancing the demands of our professional lives with the joys and responsibilities of being moms. Join us each week as we discuss the latest trends in agribusiness, share insightful interviews with industry experts, and sprinkle in some heartfelt anecdotes about the humorous and heartwarming moments that come with being a working mom in agriculture. Welcome to this week's episode of Coffee in the Barn. We are very fortunate to have with us Emily Krause, Director of Nutrition with the National Pork Board, and welcome.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Today we're going to be discussing how consumers make decisions around pork and how we can work with retailers to better provide nutritional support to consumers. One of my coworkers is on the young leadership committee within the pork industry, and he went out, I think out east somewhere to a retail store, and they talked about the different protein options in the meat case. And, you know, it was like the poultry side, there was like 12 to 15 options. The beef side, there was, let's say, 8 to 15. And then on the pork side, there was only like 4 to 8. How do you foresee us expanding the meat cut offerings at grocery stores and continuing that education on there's a lot more things you can do with a loin?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, first I want to say that there is data to show that when thinking about pork, it's not top of mind. There's other options like chicken, like beef, like turkey, like fish, like plant-based that seem to come before pork because pork is just forgotten about. It's not top of mind when it comes to purchasing it for family meals, for health, etc. And so, just talking about it is the first thing. We just need to bring it into the conversation because it's not in the conversation. But also, again, I'm biased. I'm past retail dietitian. I think if a retailer does have a dietitian, that can be a really strong point to have those conversations with dietitians and say, hey, there's 8 lean cuts of pork. 3 of those are certified, Heart-Check certified by the American Heart Association. That means they have less than 5 grams of fat. So super lean. And chicken tends to have this this health halo. Like when people think about, I want to lose weight or, January, get fit, they think of chicken. And what we know is that tenderloin, which is the leanest cut of pork, is just as lean as boneless, skinless chicken breast. And that shocks people. They're like, what? I thought pork was fatty. And then there's so many options that they can have. And of course, it's not just the lean cuts of pork. There's so many different cuts. I love a good pork shoulder. But a lot of those cuts aren't in the stores. And I think it's because people aren't asking for them, right? If people aren't asking for them or looking for them, they're probably not purchasing them. And why would a store want to have something that people aren't going to buy? And I think that's tough because it's kind of on 2 ends. People need to see it in the store and the store needs to have it for people to buy it. But then people need to know that it's an option and how to use it in order to buy it. And so going to those people that are really educating shoppers in the store where they buy food, like the retail dietitian, is super important. And as I've been having conversations with dietitians, they know tenderloin. They've heard of a loin, they've heard of a chop, but that's about it. They're like, wait, ground pork is a thing? Sometimes stores have ground pork, sometimes they don't. And so I think by showing these dietitians, especially those that work really closely with their merchandising teams and their buyers, that, hey, I talked to the team at the National Pork Board, and we know that people are looking for an affordable protein that's versatile, that is lean, it's going to fit into their healthy eating pattern. And right now we have tenderloin, and people need more than just the tenderloin. And starting to build that conversation and build that demand. And I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. I think that's, there's so many factors that go into it. But when we're talking at at retail and that education, and by a dietitian being able to go into the aisle and say, hey, here is this tenderloin. These are the different ways that you can prepare it. Did you know that we just did some flavor research that showed that the tenderloin, when it's in the air fryer, it has such an intense sweet flavor. And so, people like to eat food that tastes good, and it's even better when it's nutritious. And so if you can get people excited about eating these types of cuts, then they're going to purchase it more and help build that ask for having those products in. And I mean, it's a lot of work, right? I mean, we just talked about there's a lot of dietitians that work for dairy and beef. And so they're out there educating. And so we're really trying to create this community of people that understand pork. They know the lean cuts and can help share that message and exponentially bring more awareness and get pork on the table.
Yeah, and I think you highlighted a really good point of the retailers do have a pretty large hand in what is offered within the meat case, but targeting the consumer specifically to whether that's through social media or digital platforms and showing them, these are different things that you can do that you might not necessarily have thought about, and just raising awareness of the pork shoulder or other cuts, and just starting that conversation to prompt them to start to ask for those cuts at the meat counter. I think that's probably the most efficient way and fastest way to increase the cut offerings within the grocery store, especially in the fresh meat.
Yeah. And, too, a lot of retailers are now getting more high tech and have TVs. I don't know if your local grocery store has TVs above different departments or in checkout. So there's two things that I think are super cool. And the retailers that are coming out with these, I think this is a huge opportunity for us to grab a hold of. But they have these TVs in produce in the meat section and sometimes in center store where they can do ads where they're talking about, items on sale or, a specific product. But what they can also do is give meal inspiration. And we know that most people, I forget the percentage, I know there's a percentage out there, but most people do not meal plan, and they go to the store on a Tuesday night to buy groceries for Tuesday dinner. And so if the grocery store, can put together, hey, we have this pork tenderloin and these, I'm trying to think, I'm thinking only of crock pot recipes right now, which isn't good for I think I'm but something where they can just put it in the oven and bake it, maybe even potatoes and, a side salad. Not saying you have to have a salad, but, putting something together where they have that inspiration on the screen right above where it's sold. People are probably going to the fresh meat case to buy a protein. But if they see that on the screen, well, that's easy. They just told me what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. Same thing goes for these end caps. They have a lot more stores are adopting these refrigerated end caps and bunkers where they can have fresh and dried goods together in one end cap on the end of an aisle. And so you can have recipe inspiration, which in my opinion is better than a recipe, because especially if you're buying groceries for Tuesday night dinner on a Tuesday, you don't have time to go through a recipe. But if it tells you, you're not in your head. But if you say this plus this plus this, throw it in a pan, throw it on a baking sheet, and in 30 minutes you have dinner, that's a huge win, especially for families.
And if we could have all of the ingredients that you need in one spot.
Yeah. And that's what
that would make life so much easier.
That's what these bunkers have. They have the fresh, the frozen if it's there, and the dried goods, so it's one-stop shop.
That's a great idea. I wish, from what I've seen, our grocery store does not have that. But that is an absolutely great idea, because I can tell you, for the most part, we try to meal plan, and, we're a family of 4, soon to be 5, and that's like the last thing I want to do after working all day and taking care of the kids is try to think about what I need to make for dinner. Alleviating just that mental load from parents and just making life, easy where you can just, it's 30 minutes. Like, I call it the bewitching hour between 4:45 and when dinner's on the table, because everyone is cranky and hungry and you're stressed out from the day and you're trying to get 50 things done at once. And so I really appreciate that idea.
Well, it's even thinking, there's a lot more, we're seeing marinated cuts or kebabs that already have the veggies with it in the meat case, which is huge, but even the deli. What I saw when I was at retail is that people didn't really cross over. If you were in the fresh case, you weren't always shopping the deli, and if you were in the deli, you weren't always shopping the fresh case. So there's an opportunity to incorporate pork into some of those deli options where it's already prepared, it's ready to go. You don't really see pork in the deli very often. It's a lot of
not usually
chicken. A lot of chicken.
Or just like sliced ham. I think that's the only thing I ever see.
That's true. There's pork.
Or pastrami.
Yeah. But if we're looking at the fresh pork cuts, it's almost non-existent. And so that's a huge opportunity to expand the way that people view and eat pork.
You mentioned that pork has 3 cuts that are identified by the Heart Association as heart healthy. Are there any other, or is the National Pork Board working towards getting any other health certifications or, I guess, labels added to different pork cuts to draw attention to the other additional health benefits to pork?
That's a good question. No, we're not currently. Personally, I'm not aware of any that would make sense right now. I will say, I don't know if I've mentioned what cuts are heart healthy, but they are the tenderloin, the sirloin roast, and the sirloin chop. That being said, this is a huge conversation right now in the world of nutrition and dietetics about what is on the label of a product that calls out the health benefits. And so it's definitely a good question. And I think it's figuring out, and I know it's being tested, but like, what can we put that is going to actually mean something to the consumer? Because there are so many different labels on so many different products. And sometimes it's like, I don't even know what this means. It's a symbol that it makes me feel like I should know what this is, and I don't know what it is. Mostly that's on, prepackaged goods in center store, but I think it's definitely something. And quite honestly, I don't think a lot of pork really has those call outs. And so,
well, pork's gluten free, so we can include that label.
No comment. Do you guys also see bananas that have a no gluten free logo on it? So, maybe that means something to some people and people appreciate that. That's one thing, but I think, there's an opportunity for on package, but there's also an opportunity for in store. I've had conversations with people and they're like, I actually don't know where pork is in my store. They know where beef is. They know where chicken is. I know that, they know where it is in general, but they don't remember seeing what part of the aisle it's in. And so, calling that out, again, that's on the retailer, on the merchandising side and what signage, but it's a huge opportunity to call out, especially those lean cuts. We know people are interested in health and wellness. We're just not calling it out.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think just our generation of individuals and parents, and we're just way more, and I'm sure COVID or the pandemic had something to do with it, but we're just way more cognizant and aware of what we're putting in our bodies. I would say for the most part. Are you seeing that same thing?
I am. I think people are more curious about food than they ever have been in understanding where it comes from. I think, people say they are interested in taste and flavor and nutrition and cost and sustainability and all these things, but it's really the purchasing patterns that showcase what drives that. But I do think people are interested in, making sure that they feel confident in what they're feeding their family. And so we know that pork is a great option for families. It's just educating them on knowing that it can be a part of what they view as a healthy lifestyle for feeding their family.
Yeah, I will just add that, as everyone's then experiencing inflation and the price of most goods going up, pork has been one of those items that really hasn't gone crazy.
Mm-hmm. It's an affordable protein. I think if people eat animal proteins and are looking for a nutrient-dense protein, it's one of the most affordable. And that has a huge story to tell because people are price sensitive and they feel like they can't afford to feed their family well. And that's just not the case. I think there are options out there. I mean, no one can argue with the fact that food costs more than it did 4 or 5, however many years ago it is now. But it's about that education and again, a barrier. It's not just price. It's not just taste or familiarity. It's when people buy it, they need to know what to do with it. And people know what to do with chicken. People know what to do with beef. They just don't feel as confident when it comes to pork. And I think that a lot of people have had bad experiences with overcooked pork chops or overcooked pork. And so they just think that they're going to have, that's what they're going to do when they get it. And they're nervous to spend money on something that they don't know is going to turn out potentially. And so there's just so much opportunity to show people how easy it can be.
Oh, it's so easy.
Mm-hmm.
145. Rest for 3 minutes. 2 simple steps.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't take super long, especially if you're grilling. I mean, it's quick and easy.
Oh, yeah. This is, may get a little controversial, but what is your view on the retail side with the competition of alternative meats to pork, beef, chicken, other meat sources? How do you foresee that alternative meats playing into the availability of, say, real meat, but animal-based meats availability within the grocery store?
That's a really good question. I think, there's so many factors with that. One, there's just so many companies out there, and I think taste and flavor is a huge thing. If we're talking purely from a nutritional standpoint, a lot of those products have added saturated fat. So it's, people say that meat has saturated fat. Well, so does animal or plant-based proteins. They oftentimes have a lot of sodium added to them to make them taste good. And then if we're talking about the nutrients and the protein, the bioavailability of nutrients in animal proteins in general is going to be more than a plant-based protein. And I am under I always say all foods fit. I'm all about moderation. I enjoy tofu. I work with the pork board. I enjoy tofu. I enjoy beef. I enjoy all of it. It can all fit. I think it just depends on the person. In my opinion, I don't think anyone should be scared into having one or the other because of health reasons. I think so many people think that, well, if I want to eat healthy, I have to eat plant-based protein. I can't eat animal protein. And that's just not the case. All foods fit, but I'm also, the bioavailability of nutrition is more so in animal protein. In my opinion, it tastes better. And so I think it fits. Do I think it's going to overtake animal protein? No. I think the cost is more. it's just not realistic for a lot of people. I mean, it's definitely cool to try, and personally, I think it's fun to try different ones, but it's a part of the plate. It's not something that should be recommended one over the other. And so it's interesting though, because there's a lot of new things coming down the pipeline, and it's, because people can't afford, at the end of the day, a lot of people can't afford plant-based proteins. It's just out of a lot of people's price ranges. And like I said, we shouldn't have people scared that they're not feeding their family well if they're not giving them plant-based protein.
Yeah, and I think...
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you kind of mentioned the additional ingredients that are included in these plant-based alternative meat sources. And I think, when we look at labels today, there's a lot of extra stuff and names on things that, I'm a nutritionist and I don't even know what some of these ingredients are without looking them up. And I think, for those families and individuals that are looking for providing and eating, I don't want to say all natural, but a whole foods based approach, like low additives, low filler ingredients, meat and protein sources. The only ingredient in pork is pork, unless it's sausage or bacon or some other processed meats. But in that case, 98% of the ingredient is still from its original form.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I think it is an interesting conversation, because you do have the people that are plant-based protein, plant-based protein, but then they're talking about non-processed foods. And so it's ironic. And
it's a kicker conversation.
Yeah, it is. And I just, I always say, it's like, if you want to eat that, go ahead, but go into it knowing what you're eating and knowing that it's not necessarily more healthful than the alternatives. So my opinion is that we just need to educate people, and people need to make their own decisions on what they choose to eat. They shouldn't be scared into eating one thing or another, but they should have the information and make those decisions for themselves. And, marketing is powerful.
Yeah, I think, after talking with Kristen last week and you this week, I think the National Pork Board is on the right trajectory in the way that it's approaching the educational side of not influencing, but educating the consumer how we tell the story of pork and the nutritional benefits of it and all the different cuts and ways that you can eat it.
Totally. Yeah. People just, like I've said several times, it's not a consideration. It's not on the table. And so we're trying to bring it to the table and show that it can be an option, and it can be nutritious and flavorful. And it's been a fun journey so far, and it will continue to be.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how things evolve over the next handful of years. I just would like to kind of end today's discussion in asking you, what is your favorite cut of pork?
Well, that's a good question. So I should have a better answer for this, since I work with pork board, but I have several. So I love pork belly. It's not only in cut, but I love a good pork belly. I just went to Southeast Asia earlier this year, and the joke was that I didn't even have to try to find pork, because there was pork in every meal. I also love a good pulled pork, so pork shoulder. And then, I love a chop, like a grilled chop. So I don't know if I could pick one. I think it depends on how it's prepared, but my favorite lean is a chop, and then I think shoulder and a pork belly. All over bacon, which surprises people. I know bacon is favorite food, and it's on the list, but it's down the line compared to some other ones. How about yours, Morgan?
Well, I would say ground pork and bacon are usually always in the fridge. That is one of the go-to breakfast items on my 3-year-old's plate is either sausage or bacon. And so I would say those are probably the top 2 things that are always around, but I really like trying new things. We got a smoker a couple years ago, and I think I've used it more than my husband has because I like to try different recipes and, cook things, especially when we're having like family gatherings or whatnot. I want to be able to educate those around me the different ways that we can cook pork and offer it. And so I would say I've made a really good pork shoulder recently, and I'm in charge of the Easter ham this year, so we'll see how that goes as well.
Is that the first time that you've done?
It's not the first time I've done it, but it's the first time I'm doing this new recipe.
Okay. Well, you'll have to let me know how it goes.
Yeah, so we'll see. But yeah, so it's a toss up. I just love meat in general. I say that we're a meatitarian family.
I love that. Well, and I think too, to your point about showing your family and friends about like the way that you can prepare it. I mean, that's the best thing. I mean, we've all been somewhere where we had something that we just can't stop eating, or we like can't get out of our brain that we like, I need the recipe.
Right.
You're doing that. That's awesome. That's all I have. This was awesome, Morgan.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate your insight into the retail side and how the National Pork Board's working with healthcare providers and expanding on that story that the National Pork Board's working on telling.
Absolutely. Excited to be a part of it.
All right. Well, we really appreciate your time today and hope you have a great rest of your week.
Thanks, Morgan. Yeah, you too.